1.
All right, guys. Hi, everyone. How's it going? Fireworks.
Roger is God today on a cloud.
This is where I got to be on the perch to have this conversation about Marcus Aurelius, you know?
Well, he's certainly on cloud 9.
Yes, sir.
That was a good one.
Well, we have a really exciting show for you today. And I think what we're going to talk about is going to be highly relevant to everyone. It doesn't matter what walk of life you're from. And it doesn't matter what you're experiencing, good or bad. I think this is like full embodiment of our being. And that's why I'm really excited to share all this great stuff. And matter of fact, it's from the book Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. If you haven't heard of it, I'm going to give you the cover here.
What a beautiful cover.
Yeah, it is. It really is a nice cover. I love this cover. And Marcus Aurelius was actually a really handsome fellow. Here's a picture of him.
I love Marcus Aurelius. Honey, I'm going to kill you.
Okay. Well, guys.
Do you know who Marcus Aurelius
Wait, did Marcus Aurelius write other books?
That is a really good question. That's like the only thing I didn't do any research on.
Wait, what was that? Okay, wait, pause. What's that one book called about the 4 something?
Oh, the 4 Agreements.
The 4 Agreements.
Yeah, that's by Don Luis.
Oh, okay.
That's not Marcus Aurelius.
Marcus Aurelius, I feel like y'all have talked about him a lot.
Yeah.
Honey, do you want to tell everybody who Marcus Aurelius is first before you go on?
And when he was alive, please.
Absolutely. That would be a pleasure.
In for a treat on this one.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'll give everybody a second to read that. No, I'm kidding. I'll just read it for you.
Wait, he was the Roman emperor?
He's a Roman emperor. He was the Roman emperor, the most powerful person of his time. And what really makes this book so powerful, or let me go back. It was not a book originally, right? It was written as his journal entries. And then his journal entries got published later on. And but he would not have wanted them to. Matter of fact, it was his request that these never become published. And they're intimate writings. They're writings that it's stuff he wrote to himself, and memoir, if you will, right? And so, but what is really powerful about this book is that here's a man that could have done anything he wanted to. He lived as the emperor, so he really could have, casted his enemies away. He could have lived a luxurious lifestyle and ate all the delicious foods and drank all the incredible wines of his time. And but he lived in a time. He lived in a mindset of humility and also detachment. So that really, really grabbed my imagination, and really defines for me what the ideal leadership looks like, right? And there's especially living in this time right now where we're easily captivated by social media, and where, the next shiny object is dangling in front of us. And but this really allows us to kind of recalibrate on things that are really important, and stop feasting our eyes on the next thing. And I think that's highly relevant. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
What was the book called again? I'm sorry.
It's called Meditations, and I'm going to share it here. There you go. Okay, cool. Back. So humility, living unattached, and staying in causation. Because what can happen is, like, we get overridden by all of what's going on around us. And do y'all get that? Do you get the significance of being in humility when you're the most powerful person in the world? Does that resonate with you?
It absolutely does. I didn't realize how many times I say, I just realized. Okay, so I remember this one day I was sitting in a mastermind group where we were speaking to a very renowned leader in real estate. And he said, you know what money does? Money just does simply reveal us. They said two times money really reveal us.
Mhm.
We have a lot of it and we have none of it. He says, see who you really are when you have everything. And if you want to know somebody's true being behind the mask, give them all the money or strip them away of all of it. They said the moment that happens, we just become completely naked. And so humility to me is that a person who's generous becomes extremely generous when they have it. So it enhances who we are. So to add some thought to what you just said, humility is our ability to know that whatever I have is not for granted.
Yeah.
Whatever I see, whatever I've been blessed with, it can just go away in 1 minute, 1 second, in a blink of an eye. And if it did disappear, who would I be?
Yeah.
And I think humility simply is having that awareness at all times that it is in an immense amount of appreciation and respect for what we have. I think to me that's humility.
Well, that's beautiful, Rosie. And you know, when we do take inventory of what all we do have, if it's not money, then what is it? And so Marcus starts his book off by listing off all the relationships that are important to him and all of the great lessons that he's learned from them. And some of the stuff that he mentions is like the simplicity of life, like the lessons he learned from his dad and his grandfather and his stepdad, or how not to make everything about the lavishness or about a lavish lifestyle. How to just live a real simple life, you know. So I can really appreciate that, especially being an emperor. I'm sure it was there's a lot that can entice you, and especially when you can have it all, you know. And but some of the things that he admired most about the his close family members were how they were simple people, and they had a lot of self-control.
Yeah.
Wait, can you go back?
Yeah.
Uh, Go back two.
This one.
No, one more.
One more. Let's see, what do you remember what it was?
What is the it said something about causation.
Oh, causation. Okay, okay. Let's see. Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah, that's a really good one. I'm glad you're asking. So there's an option for us at all times to be either in causation or in effect.
Yeah.
So, and I would love to get Rosie your idea on this too. But causation is like basically reclaiming your power or keeping the power to yourself, right? And effect is when we say, Rosie, can you elaborate on this? I need your eloquence.
Let me just give you a very simple layman language of it, right? You're cooking food on the stove. The fire is the cause. Cooking of the food is the byproduct and effect, right? When the food is not cooked right and it's taking too long, you don't start beating up on the food, you turn the heat up, right? So heat is the cause and the effect is the cooked food, right? So similarly in our lives, our being is the cause, having and doing is the effect. So oftentimes we think that, okay, if I do these things, then I would have these things, then I will become happy, right? Where I have failed miserably at that concept in last 15 years of my mature life, where I had to every time go back to be happy and content first. Then I did those things with more joy, and I naturally had the things I always desired. And maybe I had it, today's call is very, very beautiful. And I think people think look from outside in, they only look at beautiful pictures online and they only look at our webinars saying great things. But I don't think anybody gets to really see behind the scenes all the adversities we handle. right? All the tough conversations we handle. And I was talking to a group of my friends who are very successful people in human behavior and their careers. And and they're in coaching businesses and stuff like that. I said, you know what I realized after sitting down with you guys for last few years. First of all, I never thought that our worlds collaborate in any way. So I always felt like an outsider, and maybe that's my limiting belief, whatever you want to call it. And I was like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to become good at this negotiation stuff. This human behavior stuff, this understanding how mind works, all of that stuff. And there's so many times, 90% of the time, I failed at it during a week. If I learned something new and I did it, I just failed at my face, like literally trip on my face down. And every time I failed, there was one thing that was common. I was doing it from my head. I was doing it as a technique. But the moment I was able to let it go and did it from my heart, something magical happened, and I gave myself permission to do it again. And I often ask myself, I was like, you know what? The question is, how do we give ourselves permission? So sometimes being in cause is giving yourself permission to be okay with whatever is happening, knowing something good is going to happen later. So cause is that I am the creator. I am the one creating the reality. I am the one who is going to decide what's going to happen next and how I'm going to respond to it. Life is going to happen all the time. I just choose not to happen with it. So if I react and happen with it, I'm at effect. Being at cause of something is always the place of power and more contentment. So what I had to give myself permission for in that moment when I kept on failing, I was like, I made this connection in my mind. I said, you know what? Coaching and therapy and all the psychology work is by appointment. You go to a psychiatrist and a therapist and a coach and you make an appointment. You know what we do is therapy, coaching, psychiatry, impromptu. You don't know what the next 30 seconds of your day is going to look like. So my cause became that I need to become so good at it that because I'm not given an appointment and heads up on when I'm going to show up, how, I got to become good at it so that it doesn't matter what happens, I'm okay. So that's like being at cause rather than saying, I'm not going to ever get good at it. Life is never going to be perfect for me. I don't belong here, blah, blah, blah. Saying, you know what, whatever is happening, I'm okay because I know what's beating in my heart. And I know what my intent is. That is claiming your power back. That's in causation. Does it make sense, Brie?
Yeah, to me, it kind of like what is written down there, kind of the flip version. Like if you stay in cause, you're basically living unattached to whatever the outcome is.
Yeah.
And byproduct of that is having humility in everything that you're doing.
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
Beautiful connect. Matter of fact, you need to switch this message around because she's absolutely correct on that.
I like that.
Living in causation means you're living unattached, and naturally you're a humble person. Humility is about beautifully.
Humility is the byproduct of staying in causation. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's realizing. So one of the things that he talks about is realizing our place in nature and realizing how small of a piece of the pie that we are, how small of. So here's an emperor talking about how small he is. That's pretty humbling because most of the time you have people who are not in that position talking about how great they are. And so this is the inverse of that, which I think is really commendable.
Very
and
good.
so who reads meditations? We have athletes, we have politicians, and we have entertainers and even world leaders who have mentioned reading meditations. And some people have a habit of reading it every year. I know there's a Chinese leader who has read meditations 100 times so far, and he's mentioned receiving something new every time he's read it. So, and I think it'll allow us to really see. Now, something to share with you guys, he had 13 kids, and 7 of them passed away in his lifetime. So he got to see the demise of 7 of his children, and he only lived to be 58 years old, right? This was a time of a plague and all these sorts of things, and people got sick and they didn't live long. So can you imagine? He said, "Kiss your kids goodnight, like as if they're not going to wake up tomorrow morning."
Wow.
Mm.
And we have to ask ourselves, are we living with that much intentionality?
I just want to add something here. And, sometimes I forget that today is a webinar day, right? We're about to jump on a streaming call, and life is happening. And, sometimes I look at the call coming up. I was like, man, I need to really get my head right because I want to be present here. And the carry on of experience of the previous day and the ability to break away from it and show up differently, every time I do it, I feel like a little win happened. Like I feel like I won over myself every time. Brie, you know what I'm talking about? Like if you have a one tough conversation with someone and then you have an easy conversation, and it doesn't matter what has happened, but you're able to break away from it and show up for the other person the way they needed. There's a winning in it, and all of a sudden that bad thing disappears and just everything just turns out, and you're like, I'm so glad I didn't say or compromised on something on moving forward, right? I feel like these are the little moments, little wins we really need sometimes, just to win over ourselves.
We got a comment coming in, Rosie, from Dwayne Kidman. And he says, live in the moment and only focus on what you can control.
Yeah.
And I think that was a huge lesson in there. Like, there's so many things going on in our lives, but if we can just focus on the one thing, like what's my highest and best use in the moment, is the mindset that he kind of talks about. And I can't tell you how many times I do that. And this is a journal entry to himself, right? He's talking to himself. He's reminding himself he's not perfect, and he's saying, "Hey, just remember, you have to ask yourself, what is it in the moment that I can do that is the greatest expression of myself?" Does that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Brie, what comes to your mind when you hear this?
Well, I was gonna say, you know what I think is interesting is that all of these great books, and like Marcus Aurelius, like I've heard y'all talk about him a lot, and all of these, I guess they're great, they're historic, but I don't really see a lot of things nowadays that are this insightful. And the fact that they were able to be that insightful without really, I mean, there was no technology when he was there, right? And like there, and it sometimes makes me wonder, like, how is it that we can't become that insightful, or why are things not, why are we not having someone writing a book like this now, or what is it where the majority is not as insightful as this one person, even though we have the access to all of these tools
Wow.
that
Yeah.
we have.
That's a very insightful question you asked. And Roger, I think he's actually
Well,
segue into perfect thing after this.
I
Yeah.
mean, Bree, what you're making me think of is not indulging in cheap entertainment, and I think he referred to it as, I don't know, pigeon fighting or something. I don't know what it was that he was exactly talking about, but in essence, during his time, it was the Instagram of his time, if you would, right? So nowadays, if you see anyone, they got the phone stuck to them, so there's no way to like just kind of observe life. Everybody's observing a screen rather than observing reality.
Mhm.
And so, where is that great insight supposed to come from? And I agree with you. I think it was a simpler time, and it was a time for them to detach and kind of just make observations about life.
Yeah.
And that's probably what's missing, according to what you're saying.
That's
Yeah.
really funny that you wrote that there, and I didn't know that.
No, actually, you made me think of that. I was actually one of the banners, and I was going to bring it up later, but you really brought that to my attention. Is how I think perhaps would you agree that maybe we're being bombarded by so many things that's how we're losing scope of what's really
Yeah.
important.
And I think the world we're living in right now has done such a good job at keeping us distracted that we think him losing 7 children is incredibly painful. And we have, I was on my in a master call with my mentor this past weekend. He said people have the same reaction to losing an iPhone as losing to a child.
No, seriously.
No way.
Look at where our consciousness has gone.
Oh wow.
So, could it be possible the loss we are feeling, we're feeling the pain equivalent to a real loss when the real loss is not even happening?
Hmm.
This is a great way to kind of, get my, yesterday I was on a walk and Roger was reviewing these conversations with me because he's like, hey, we're going to talk about this today. And one thing he said is that, hey, what we forget is that how little we are, right? And all day I felt like, oh my gosh, I accomplished so much. I'm about to do so many bigger things. I'm handling so many problems. I was a very big person in my head. But while taking that walk, I started zooming out. I was like, okay, I zoom out of the city of Austin. I zoom out of the state of Texas. I zoom out of the map of America. I zoom out of the earth. And all of a sudden I looked at myself in my imagination from the space looking at the earth, and I couldn't even see myself walking on the road anymore. I said, I mattered that much.
What's really phenomenal is he had the idea of an aerial viewpoint back before airplanes existed, and so he was standing on a really big hill somewhere. So I thought that was fascinating.
That's amazing. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and Rosie, and so like a lot of times, also I want to touch on this too. Is there's this lost art of advocating for love, I feel like, and this is something he talks about. Is like, don't allow someone's resentment be your reality, right? Don't let someone. Oh, I like this. See, okay, I just have to indulge.
We and I are just not going to resent you right now.
I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna look at your computers. I'm gonna fix whatever it is that's going on there. But so yeah, so like I think that if we can advocate and realize, he says something really interesting that we have to learn to work well with others. If you could think of other people as you being the left hand, them being the right hand, right? It takes two hands to get something done, or the bottom set row of teeth and the top row of teeth. It takes both set of teeth to chew your food. And so if you could think of the people that are in your life, we need them to work together on something to accomplish a worthwhile pursuit. Like there's nothing that we can do on our own. And he uses this illustration about how we actually come to each other's aid. And if, for an instance, we can stop and realize that people are not dispensable. Like just because someone says something to you and whatever, they hurt your feelings and now you're getting rid of them and you're cutting all sorts of people out of your life, ultimately you're going to be alone. So it's not about other people, it's about ourselves. How do we grow to a point? And he says, like, why are we expecting such incredible things out of people? Is almost unrealistic, the expectations we set on others.
Yeah.
He said,
I think you gave a very good example yesterday. And Brie, I want to kind of get your brain thinking with me on this. Is that if you look at a tree, right? Like all of a sudden, you don't get mad at a tree. Why don't you just walk? There is more sunlight in that area. Why don't you just walk over and get more sun and live rather than dying, right? We don't get mad at a dog and say, hey, why don't you just deep dive, take a deep dive in ocean and swim for long periods of time, right? But for some reason, we get mad at other people. And he said, nature of people is the nature of being. And yeah, wow, man, this is a very good thought that we just got in comments. When someone wrongs you, ask yourself what belief about the world caused them to act this way. Yeah, because people are reasons.
yeah, people are reasons. Right on.
People are reasons. And I think that is the biggest maturity I had to arrive at. My biggest beef in the world used to be, what the heck, because I truly believe I come from, my own education around spirituality. And they say you should never do for someone what they can do it for themselves, because we're handicapping them, right? We should empower people. But there is a fine line between the two. There is one where you are not doing it and empowering them, and there is one where you're judging them. And I think that's what they're saying. What Duane is saying. When someone wrongs you, ask yourself what belief about the world caused them to act this way.
That's
And
beautiful.
that's beautiful.
Well articulated.
Bree, what comes to your mind? I want to ask Bree.
What's the question?
What comes to your mind when we talk about this? That accept people the way they are, because we work with a lot of people. Like, all personalities.
That we do. I think really it's accepting people as they are, but also when you understand what their end goal would be, whether that's someone that you're helping or maybe like a vendor that you're working with, like what is the commonality that you have and what are you trying to accomplish with them? And then if you're putting that forefront in your mind and then helping them to realize that same thing, that it makes it a lot easier because now you're not fighting against each other.
Yeah.
You're on the path with one another.
Beautiful, beautifully said. And this get mad, I had to mature out of it very quickly. Because I was like, man, I'm burning myself up every moment. Everything changes. I'm just like, I happen with it. So that was a big maturity for me personally.
Yeah, to have tolerance, to say, well, naturally, this person would behave this way because of what they're experiencing. To be able to see it from another person's eyes, and I'll tell you the honest truth, I'm still working on it because, and I think the easiest people to trigger me are my family members, and I only have two. One of them's on the show, like direct family. I'm not, of course, like.
I don't know who gave you a thumbs up on that, but we need to have a talk.
So look, we're going to be easily triggered by the people we live with, right? I mean, the people we hardly see once a year, twice a year. How are they in the world supposed to trigger us? And but this book definitely put it in perspective. It's a beautiful trait to have.
Can I share something my grandma used to say? Okay.
No,
On my dad's side, my grandma was pretty gangster, to be honest. Okay, so she was not like a woman who would take shit from anyone. And somebody would tell her, "Oh my gosh, your husband is so nice," and she would say this, and I'm going to say it in the language that we natively spoke, and I'll translate it for you. She would say, "Ra pya janiye ya va pya janiye." That means you only know if you walk the walk.
If you walk their path.
You walk their path or you deal with them. Until then, you don't know. So she was pretty, she was pretty straightforward, right? So I think the spirituality literally comes down to how well we deal with the physical world. It's so good to be so harmonious in a forest where you don't have anybody to work with and deal with, but now everything comes very real.
Well, imagine this, you're emperor, and anytime you're in leadership, right, what happens? People are bringing you their problems.
Yeah.
Right? And so here's a guy who has to keep his emotional and mental stability. He has to keep a calm in the midst of the fire, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, if he can do it, then probably there's some level of detachment. And because the easiest thing for us to do is to react and create a bigger explosion.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we just take a step back or a breather? And I got this idea. I was like, I need to pause before I respond. And I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. I'm gonna pause before I respond. And then it happened, and I didn't get to exercise that. And I was like, man, this is gonna take a while. Right? This stuff sounds easy, but is it really easy? And are you guys having any success in there? Because I need some life hacks in that right now.
Bree, does it happen to you sometimes where we're like, oh, you know what? Let's just get over it quickly. Let's just have fun. And then we forget but that was not the real solution. And it happens again. You're like, oh, I thought we were over it.
Yeah, all the time.
One of this great successful therapist said, and she said, that means you never had a solution in the first place. Placated out of it.
Oh, that's the day you're using that word, huh?
Yeah. So I've been like,
What does placate mean?
I say, listen, we're not, this solution is not permanent. This is you wanting me to get back into the business discussion again. And I'm very tempted to do that. But I'm afraid we're going to get stuck there again. So let's not placate ourselves. Let's just really solve this problem. And he was not having it.
I was like, man, you learned a new word and you're using it on me every chance you get.
That's the best way to remember something. Do reps.
She's practicing.
Okay, what if I told you that Marcus Aurelius was big on tracking? And here's the thing, I have the book on my desk, and I promise you, I had to read it 3 times just to grab this one piece. And I was like, aha, I found it. And so it's, I'm going to share, it's kind of lengthy on the screen, but I'm going to look at it. So ignoring what goes on in other people's souls, no one ever came to grief that way. But if you won't keep track of what your own soul's doing, how can you not be unhappy? So keyword track. I know there's double negative in there, and that really confuses the whole
Yeah,
thing.
it's like double negatives in there. So basically what he's saying is that ignoring what goes on in other people's souls, no one ever came to grief that way. Oh, if we truly become curious about someone else, there is no grief in it. But if you won't keep track of what's happening within, like if I don't keep track of what's going on, the only thing I can be is unhappy.
No, actually, if you ignore other people's souls and what the other people are up to, there's no way to have any grief on that, right? Because usually, what are people's complaints? So and so did this, so and so did that, right? But if we won't keep track of what our own soul is doing, that means if we don't keep track of and what does he mean by our soul? Or I don't know if a soul has a doing. I think he's talking about what it is that we're in pursuit of. What are the things in our lives and how are we handling them? If we can track those, then how can you not be unhappy? Which is a double negative, so it's like positive, right? 2 negatives.
So how can you be happy? So basically, if you track, you're happy. Yes, it's true. You know, my happiest days are when I'm actually keeping track of how many problems I solved. I look back and I say, oh my gosh, I solved 9 problems today. And I feel so accomplished. Maybe nothing changed.
A good way, I think you're right. A good way to sometimes find some relief is this is really what resonated out of the whole entire book. This was the one piece that I kind of wanted to hinge onto was the idea of tracking. And so this is 2,000 years ago, and he's talking about tracking. So it's like, okay, if it's the difference between being happy and unhappy, then when am I going to decide that these things are worth tracking? Right?
Yeah.
Like if that's the price for my happiness, then when am I going to choose to start paying that price to be happy?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that resonates with anybody. We do have a comment though.
That's beautiful.
Dwayne, books like Don't Sweat the Small Stuff or The Obstacle is the Way or takes on the principles of Marcus Aurelius Meditations. Marcus said the impediment to action advances action. Hence, the challenges are not setbacks, but chances to grow and refine ourselves. Deep stuff.
Wow. Yeah. So impediment to action advances action. So what is impediment? Impediment is something that slows down, obstructs, or prevents progress. So it's basically a physical, mental, or situational barrier. So anytime there's a barrier, it actually advances the action. It's true. You know, every time there's a problem, you know, one of my very good friends and mentors, Chase Hughes, he says, every problem is an opportunity. And if you don't see it that way, there's a camera angle problem.
Your field of view.
Yeah.
And also just want to compliment Dwayne. Dwayne, I love your posts, man. You're always posting some really inspirational things and really advancing the community and putting good positive vibes out there. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dwayne. And so it seems like, how was the conversation today, Bree? What do you think?
Yeah, I liked it.
You know, I'll tell you this, for some reason, I don't know what has happened in last 5 minutes. I have been getting nonstop phone calls. So either people are watching me here or
The
some.
impediment to action advances action. There we go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Hey, Duane, you literally demonstrated that in my personal life right now. The barrier to action for action.
Well, I think in a nutshell too, also what I think this is a reframing of many things, because what'll happen is we'll go on and live in our lives and everything's great and we'll buy the next shiny object and we'll hoard and all this stuff. I think if we can really take the lessons from this book, here's a man who could add anything he wanted and chose to uh, live with the bare minimals. And that's really humbling and also very attractive. Like imagine you're just, laid out, you got like a straw bed outside and you're enjoying the shade of a tree or eating an apple. Like some of these things that we take for granted are priceless. Like just imagine somebody who's falsely incarcerated or whatever. They've given up all of those joys that we could take that we take for granted, like sitting under a tree and enjoying it,
Yeah.
a little fruit or something, right? Instead, what do? We want to set our sights on sitting at a 5-star restaurant eating a steak dinner. Like that's good and great and everything else, but I think this is really for me because I'm a foodie. I love those things, and since I've been reading this book, man, I've been just cooking more at home and just enjoying simple things and I don't want to ever, one of the things he really mentions in this book also is not to be preaching to people and having sermons and stuff, but rather demonstrating uh,
Yeah.
courage and self-control, so those are
Yeah.
really
Thank you, Roger. You have done a phenomenal job. I've seen you the amount of work you put into studying this material, and you taking lead every week in setting the tone for the call is amazing. And I think Bree and I both benefit from it significantly. And sometimes we don't need another another skill or another mindset to deal with something. Sometimes we just need to be reminded. And today was a
I just want to mention one last thing though before we leave, and I know this is something I think everybody will benefit from. Is there's a moment in the book where he talks about laying in bed and not wanting to wake up, and then he's reminded of all the insects and the birds and the bees and the different creatures of the planet and how they're all going to work and they're all doing those things that they were destined to do, right? And then he has this conversation with himself and saying, "Man, well, why can't I just go do what it is that I'm put on this earth to
yeah,
do?"
without disdain. Yeah, yeah.
You know? And so I would say like this draws purpose back into. I hope there's somebody that's watching here today, and maybe they're dealing with something at work or whatever, and this reframes it for them that you know what, hey, this is what I was put on the earth to do. It's not so bad, and let me just enjoy this or reframe it for them.
Yeah, perfect. Well, sounds good. Today we delivered 38 and 48. So that means great conversation. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Bree, for being here. I know you have a lot on your plate, and you figured out a way to make time for this. And you're so valued and loved. And thank you for everything that you do. Nothing changes that. And Roger, I think that was enough compliments for the day.
Awesome.
And see you next week. Bye.
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 No more compliments for you.